I'm convinced that servant leadership is the value system, it's the philosophy that is really going to work in this VUCA world. I'm convinced it's the value system we need to be living. And so out of that evolved fourth dimension leadership, and the three outer items are what we call predecessor competencies: technological, professional, and personal. Now, personal is the stuff that when I started out in my career was duh stuff. That start time, if it says 8 o'clock, means 8 o'clock. You know, those sorts of things. You can't assume all of that anymore. So those are personal competencies that you've actually got to begin taking responsibility for imprinting in people or ensuring they've got it when you hire them. The second is technological competencies. That's really about using the tools of technology that are appropriate for your position. And going back to what I said earlier, the higher you go, it moves more towards soft skills. In technology, part of what happens is the higher you go, the less of an expert you need to be on some of the core technology. In other words, you are hiring 21-year-olds, 25-year-olds straight out of college that are infinitely more competent at the use of technology than the city manager. Does that make sense? So part of it is understanding what's appropriate at what level and what role. So it's not a building block when it comes to technological competency. And then professional competency, that's about the skills for your particular profession. So if you're an engineer, you got to know how to be an engineer. If you're a detective, you got to know how to investigate a crime. If you're a fireman, you got to know how to put out a fire, etc. Those are what we call predecessor competencies. Those are the ante to get into the game. You got to have those to be able to function in the role. Beyond that, it really becomes about developing leadership. So the foundational level is relational leadership. And as I said earlier, relational leadership is leadership from the side. It is leadership of influence. And let me give you a practical example of that. With relational leadership, you really have two subgrouping of competencies there. One is human relations, one is customer service. With human relations, our tendency is to teach it from a compliance mindset. So when we teach a sexual harassment class, we teach it by telling people where the line is. You know what the problem with that is? Your people who are your problems know exactly where the line is, and they're not ever going to cross it, but they're going to go right up to it. And then you're going to get caught in the circle of, yes, but I did not violate that rule. Relational leadership takes something like sexual harassment and teaches it from the standpoint of how do you build a trust relationship as a co-leader that causes somebody to be willing to trust you and your judgment and your leadership. You've got to have the rules, but it's a whole different orientation with how you build the culture. One culture says, here's where you can go to without getting fired. The other culture says, yeah, we got the rule, but that's not the driving force. The driving force is, are you building healthy relationships that are trust-based? So at the relational leadership level, it is really leadership from the side. At the operational leadership level, that really is supervisory and managerial stuff. At the supervisory level, it tends to be more positional authority and evolves at the management level into intellectual authority. In other words, you know more about the job than I do, therefore I will follow you. The third dimension is systems leadership. At the systems leadership level, it's really about two things. One is making sure you have systems that the system works, practical, tangible kind of stuff. The other goes back to the fruit cocktail example. It's making sure that your systems are actually aligned with the values that you claim you want to create. It's about creating values alignment with your daily operating systems. Now, all three of those dimensions, relational, operational, and systems, are all about getting better at what you do. At the strategic level, it is about becoming who you want to become. Now notice again, the guitar string, the radical, the constructive tension. You saw that same concept come through in the 12 characteristics of servant leadership. They aligned there. They also align here. See, what happens is at the relational level, your anchor there is healthy relationships. At the strategic level, your anchor there is really charting the course towards the future. And what happens is, as you become more strategically focused, part of what you are doing is you're becoming more externally focused. So if you're in a role that's at the top of the organization, your primary focus needs to be externally. But in too many of our organizations, the city manager is focusing on nuts and bolts operations, which is why we basically stay trapped in the present.